Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana delivered his third national budget for this year, marking a contentious shift in South Africa's fiscal policy. The revised budget trims overall government spending from 2.60 trillion to 2.58 trillion rand, with notable cuts to social services and education. Now, these reductions follow the scrapping of a proposed VAT hike, creating a 75 billion rand shortfall addressed through spending cuts and fuel tax increases. The budget has sparked criticism from civil society and unions who argue it threatens vulnerable communities and deepens social inequality. Joining us in studio is Chairperson of the Budget Justice Coalition and Budget Analyst at Section27, Matshidiso Lungwasa. A very good evening to you. Welcome.
Good evening. Thanks for having us.
Some social services have largely carried the short end of the stick in spending reprioritization. What did you make of the minister's speech?
Yes, so that is actually so true that for years there's been a defunding of social services, both basic education, healthcare, and also social protection. And so while the minister's speech this time that's tabled, Budget 3.0, marks somewhat of a shift from the harsh austerity that we've seen over the past years, where in the past we've seen actual nominal cuts to basic education and healthcare, and we know this because we've seen those reports of doctors that are unemployed, for instance, and nurses and teachers as well. But now we're seeing more of a commitment towards, a first step, if we could say, towards real investments in education and health in those areas, which is the first time we've seen since the pandemic. And so we do see it as a first step, but in the context of persistent budget cuts over the years, it won't solve those problems overnight. There's still a long way that we have to go in terms of our fiscal policy.
Yeah, I think the big argument one cannot ignore is that these are rand and cents expenditure estimates where inflation is not taken into account.
Absolutely. And for the first time now, I think the minister did say that there will be a real increase in social spending or non-interest expenditure of 0.8%. It's the first time we're seeing real investments in many years. But at the same time, if you then allocated a basic education budget per learner or healthcare budget per healthcare user, you actually realize that it's actually going down per learner in real terms. So not only is it not really accounting for inflation accurately, because obviously there's spending pressures in healthcare or education that should be sector specific, but also it doesn't really account for the rising demand for public services.
Social development spending going down, what do you think are some of the ripple effects we'll begin to see as we look at the reality on the ground, old age grant recipients and also child support grants?
Yeah. So it is really concerning, because I think even in the speech that the minister has given, the economic outlook that has been portrayed is one that is quite depressing, to be honest. The growth projection has been revised downwards, and we know that unemployment has gone up in the last quarter. So we're seeing a rise or persistent economically vulnerable households in our country across our communities, and it just seems that there isn't sufficient social protection or opportunities also for people and those households to secure their futures. So we're deeply concerned about that. I mean, we can welcome some inflation increases towards social grants that we hadn't seen in the past. But like I said before, in a context of defunding and in a context of an economy that performs so poorly, this is just a small measure compared to what's actually needed for people in our country.
Some provisions that were announced in March are being reversed or have been reversed, if one listened to what the minister had to say. What stood out for you as we, looked at what we heard in March and what we heard yesterday?
Sure. I think that our expectations were that there would be revisions downward, because that is what Treasury had warned. And though we called out against it, we spoke out against it, saying that a VAT increase, yes, is very aggressive, but it wouldn't have translated into meaningful allocation, because it would have driven up the prices of to procure medicine, for instance, for schools as well. So it wouldn't, each rand wouldn't have gone as far as it should have. And so what really stood out for us overall is the lack of recognition of alternative revenue-raising mechanisms that could have actually ensured that we didn't have to revise our budget, the expenditure side from budget 2.0 to budget 3.0. And really in this moment, we're still calling on governments to take very seriously that it doesn't have to be regressive tax or budget cuts. You know, we can actually table a budget that works for people in this country. We just need the political will.
And looking at some of the reactions, I mean, mixed reactions coming in the wake of the budget 3.0, how do you think South Africans, ordinary South Africans, should interpret the outcome of this budget?
Yeah. Well, on the one hand, you know, to give a more balanced view, I think that ordinary South Africans, we've made progress in the sense that for the first time, I think more now than ever, there is some form of ownership of the budget and a recognition that this is our money and this budget needs to work for people in this country and it needs to actually solve the problems that we're facing. And so the backlash around the VAT increase, it just showed that when South Africans actually analyze and are committed to the budget, there is action that can be taken. On the other hand, I think that we do need to be cautious and wary about some other things. So a VAT increase has been scrapped, but then a fuel levy has been increased, and that could have implications around, you know, transport costs, around, you know, the input costs towards getting food, towards people going to hospitals or clinics, for instance, and really erode the real value of grants and social protection. So I think we should take our gains and not lose heart and not lose momentum and keep pushing governments until we get a budget that really works for our people. It might not be overnight in this budget. Maybe this budget gets tabled, but you know, there's the medium-term budget speech that's happening in October. There's the budget next year. We just need to continue that momentum, even though it may seem disheartening. There has been progress that has been made.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for speaking to us and coming in studio as we wrap that discussion. Chairperson of the Budget Justice Coalition and budget analyst at Section 27, Matshidiso Lengwasa.